Yeah, so the work that I'm presenting is part of ongoing work and is co-authored with Chirag Anand and Susan Thomas. What I'll be presenting today is primarily a characterization of liquidity provision on the NSE equity and single stock futures market. It will be a lot of tables and graphs, but I think there are interesting insights that can be drawn from those and will be useful to discuss here. So a brief background into the paper. In the perfect markets, as we know, that there are large number of buyers and sellers, and there are almost no frictions, in which case that people can trade with almost no transaction cost. But we all know that this doesn't happen in reality. So there are transactions costs, and people pay a cost for them in terms of either a cost of immediacy versus a cost of delayed execution. When I say cost of immediacy, if you are a buyer, you might not be able to purchase something at the price that you desire. So that's the cost that you pay to get an immediate execution. What's this cost of delayed execution, which is that you say, I want to buy at a particular price now, and only when the seller comes with that price, I would be willing to buy. But in that case, you will have to hold on to your order until the seller comes, and there is always a risk that there may be execution or not. So these are the two trade-offs a person face, and how, at least in the stock exchanges, this get tackled is by way of market makers. These guys are sitting on both sides of the markets and supply liquidity on buy as well as the sell side, and they therefore play an important role of supplying liquidity there. What happens in the electronic limit order book markets is this role is taken over by way of limit orders, and there may or may not be a market maker, but anybody who posts a limit order is supposed to be providing liquidity supply against whom anybody can come and trade. Now, this has been an old notion in the literature, and there have been several studies which have modeled the dynamic behavior of the order book based on whether when a trader will choose to post a market order, which is when you demand liquidity, versus a limit order, that is when you supply liquidity. So there have been a lot of studies. Now, what has happened in the recent past is, of course, we all know by now that algorithmic trading and high-frequency trading have penetrated into the markets, as a result of which the order book dynamics itself have changed. And how has that changed? Because of these, because of their access to speed, these guys can, algorithmic traders and HFT can modify and cancel orders as soon as they can enter. And this is the biggest fear, because of which the old notion that limit orders are supposed to be supplying liquidity seems to be like revisited. There are concerns whether the old notion of limit orders supplying liquidity holds or not, or are these just fleeting orders against which possibly not many traders can trade. So there is an importance over here to revisit this question of liquidity supply in the current framework of high-frequency trading and algorithmic trading. In addition, from the point of view of a regulator, there are concerns that the speed advantage that algorithmic traders and HFTs have can hurt other traders by one, because it may increase the uncertainty that another trader faces against the order that an HFT posts. In terms of if another trader wants to act upon a limit order, he may not be able to, because as soon as the HFT had sent the order and and another trader wants to hit on that HFT might cancel the order. So this is a concern. Whether that's true or not in the Indian markets, that is yet to be tested. Now, another claim or concern that comes is that these HFT or AT do not provide liquidity, and instead these guys take away liquidity most of the times from the slow traders. So in which case it raises the question, what is the function that these guys are playing? That's the second concern. And thirdly, during times of stress, when it is said that these guys should be HFT and ATs, because of their speed advantage, should be providing liquidity, they they vanish from the market. So these are all the concerns, and hence there is a need to revisit this question of liquidity supply with a focus on AT and non-AT. And as I said, this paper concentrates on the NSE equity markets. And to give you a perspective, this is the graph which shows how algorithmic trading on NSE equity market has risen. Now the graph is spanned from 2009 to 2015 August, and the dashed line that you see is the start date of collocation. That is when NSE in January 2010 permitted or allowed or provided a facility to all the traders to place their servers near the exchange premises. So as you see, until the start of collocation, the percentage of algorithmic trading, and this is in terms of trades, that is in terms of total traded value, what was the percentage of trades where there was either an AT on both sides or only on one side. So until the start of Colo, there was little algorithmic trading into the market. But as you progress towards March 2012, we see that the share substantially rose to some 50%, and by 2015, it is somewhere between 65 to 70%. Black line is for the equity spot, and futures, and blue line is for the futures and options market. So given this perspective of how much is algorithmic trading in India, I proceed on to what this paper is examining. So we examine order submission and liquidity provision characteristics of AT and non-AT. And in particular, we first ask, are there differences in the types of order that are submitted by AT and non-AT? Is it that ATs are providing a lot of limit order, or are they moving away from limit orders to special orders that the exchange offer? Of course, mostly it will be the case that these guys will be using limit orders, but we test this using data. The second question we ask is, what is the pattern of activity on AT and non-AT orders? What is the percentage in which algorithmic traders are able to trade their orders, and what is the percentage of their orders that ultimately gets cancelled in the market? That is just to capture what is the level of cancellation activity versus the traded activity in the market by AT and non-AT. The third question we ask is, within the trades that algorithmic traders might be doing, do AT supply liquidity or demand it? Do they supply liquidity to non-AT, or do they take it away from algorithmic traders? Now, the fourth question is that what is the cancellation activity, and does that happen at high frequency level? Do we see a lot of cancellations at a very short interval? And the next question is, if yes, do these cancellations occur in a short period of time, and they occur from inside the touch? Because if they are happening inside the touch, then it is certainly a problem for other traders who might be willing to just act and are not able to do that. So in this framework, there are a couple of studies which have recently come up. And the first one, which is a published study, Hanasik and Snape in 2014, this is a study on LSE. And they also examined the order submission by HFT and non-HFT on that market, and they examine whether they provide liquidity. The major result of their study is that it is the case that they provide liquidity generally to the market. And there is a very recent paper, a November 2015 working paper of Subramaniam and Zhang, his co-author, which examines the NASDAQ data, which was used by Brogard et al. And they examine the order book characteristics and a lot of these questions and how they tie up with the underlying liquidity variables of bid-ask spread and adverse selection, etc. So now, why we thought that it is useful to examine this in the context of NSE, because it's an interesting case. One, because NSE, unlike US, where it's a fragmented structure, and when you are just examining one market, you're not really examining the entire portfolio that a trader might be having. So vis-a-vis NSE, which has got a majority share in the market. So when we analyze NSE, that means we are capturing the portfolio of a trader. who is trading on these markets. And the second thing is that the data that we have got a long time series of data that can be used to distinguish between a low AT period that was prior to co-location, that is 2008, 2009, and we can have a high AT period, which is the recent period, and in this study, we are sticking to 2013. And not only this, we also get every order and trade tagged as AT and non-AT, but we do not get trader ID, just to make a mention of that. Okay, so data details, we have, as I just described, tick-by-tick orders and trades data, timestamped in Jiffys, and using this data, we create first the full order book. So we get to know at every Jiffy, what is the, how does the order book look like? Then this is we analyze NSE spot and stock futures. The period is November-December 2009 to understand how was the liquidity provisioning or order submission prior colo. And we also analyze November-December 2013 post-colo. Now there can be questions on why is this data, there's so much time lag between these two periods. One is, as we saw in the first graph, there was a time lag by which algorithmic traders actually penetrated into the markets. And our hypothesis is that by November, December, most of the traders had got their infrastructure in place. And second reason is that NSE was also improving the latency during 2010 to 2013. And by then, 2013, the systems had stabilized enough to capture this activity. So that's the reason why we take this period, but we'll do robustness checks for the other periods as well. Now, the sample for stocks that we analyze is top 200 firms by market cap in 2009 and 2013. So we look at all the top 200 firms in 2009 and top 200 firms in 2013, and we analyze the set, which is an intersection of these two. That is the common set across the two periods. And ultimately, there are 146 stocks. This is a typo. 140. There are 146 stocks in our final sample. So now I'll be showing you a lot of tables, and I'll just try to make some statements about what we can draw from that. So the first questions that I mentioned, that is, are there differences in the type of orders submitted by AT and non-AT? So this is the graph that is for the spot market. The first two columns is Q1 for 2009, that is the prior colo period, low AT, and 2013, which is the high AT period. Q1 represents the highest market cap quartile stocks, and the last two columns are quartile 4 stocks, which are, and again, the 2009 and 2013 separation. Now, as you will see, the first row indicates what is the percentage of algorithmic orders. It has risen substantially. So on Q1 stocks, topmost quartile stocks, we see on an average, ATs have a share of 78% in the total orders. And if you compare this with quartile 4 stocks, it is only 42%. So this is daily average across all stocks for Q4, and similarly with Q1. Now then we look at what is the type of orders that are being used. So the second panel is showing fraction of algo orders as IOC, which is immediate or cancel orders, SL, which is stop loss orders, MO, which is market orders, hidden orders, and limit orders. So when we see Q1 in 2009, we see for algorithmic traders, most of the orders were limit orders, but a significant percentage was hidden orders as well. 9.65% of the orders that were posted by algorithmic traders were hidden. That means they were using these special type of orders around 2009. We compare this with 2013, and the figure emerges in a similar way. That is 81% though is limit orders, but 10% is hidden orders. Additionally, there are also IOC orders which are used by algorithmic traders. So 6% of their total orders are algorithmic orders. If we compare this with quartile 4, we see that the share of hidden orders substantially rise for these stocks. 22% of the orders that are sent by algorithmic traders on quartile 4 stocks are hidden stocks. I do not have a theory right now as to why they will prefer to send hidden orders on Q4 versus Q1. And then in terms of the percentage of limit orders, of course, it drops down because of a higher share of hidden orders. So 67% of the orders by algorithmic traders are limit orders. Now we compare and contrast this with the non-algo percentage. Figures are similar. Limit orders, again, have a predominant share, but the share of hidden orders is not as high as that of algorithmic traders. But what is there to notice is that even in Q4 in 2009, when there was not much algorithmic trading, non-algorithmic traders were also using a lot of hidden orders. So essentially, it only depicts that Q4 stocks, generally traders prefer hidden orders over limit orders. And in totality, yes, limit orders are the predominant type of orders that are sent. The last two lines, AT intensity captures the percentage of trading activity on these stocks. 78% on Q1 stocks is by algorithmic traders in 2013, and 39% of total traded activity is on Q4 stocks.
5 minutes.
Huh.
Last 5 minutes.
Okay. So similar stats for SSF, and we see similar numbers, but these figures are higher for limit orders. Then what is the pattern of activity on AT orders and non-AT orders? So here what I'll highlight is the cancelled orders. Now if you see the last line, here 63% of the orders that are entered in the market are actually cancelled by algorithmic traders. And for Q4 stocks, this percentage drops down to 29%. So this was only indicating that there is a lot of cross-sectional variation between the strategies that algorithmic traders use between Q1 and Q4 stocks. And similar numbers we see for non-algorithmic traders, but the cancellation rate is not as high. If you look at the traded activity, about most of the trades that happen are via non-algorithmic traders, even in 2013. So this is for the spot. Now, what is interesting in terms of cancellations is that on SSF, that this line shows the percentage of cancelled orders in 2009 by algo and non-algo. So on SSF, we see a high rate of cancellations even in 2009, and it increased to a certain extent in 2013. So all in all, it only shows that high cancellation rate by AT, low trading activity by AT, mostly by non-ATs, it is the trades that are mentioned. Now, within the trades, who supplies liquidity? You may concentrate on just this graph, which shows how much liquidity is supplied by AT to non-AT, and this is the graph which shows how much liquidity is supplied by and a non-AT to AT. And if you compare these values, they are all similar. So 26.96% of trades, ATs supplied liquidity to non-AT, and 19% they supplied liquidity, they took liquidity from non-ATs. So all in all, we are just seeing a similar pattern across in terms of liquidity demand and supply. This is the intraday pattern of evolution of demand and supply on algorithmic traders. And what we had thought was if ATs were informed traders, then at the beginning of day, you would assume that there will be a higher supply of, demand of liquidity by algorithmic traders. We are not seeing that. Now, this is the graph it shows for spot 2013, and dashed line is for AT supply. We see a higher share of algorithmic traders supplying liquidity than what they demand. Similar is the pattern from SSF. This only intrigued us to examine whether they are informed or not informed, and this is what we plan to do in the next level of this exercise. Similar numbers for Q4, and then I'll just come to at what level of depth do we see cancellation. So when we see that a majority of the orders are being cancelled by algorithmic traders, are they being cancelled at the touch, inside the touch, or outside? So this is for the spot market, and this is as a percentage of orders cancelled in 1 second. So for that, in 2000, for Q1 stocks, we only see, like the highest market cap stocks, we see 5% of the cancellations occur inside the bid. And if you see the last row of this table, it shows that most of the cancellations that occur within 1 second are actually away from the touch, like 5 bids away from the touch. So this only indicates that even though there are fears that these guys are canceling, it might not be true that they're canceling while they're sitting at the top of the book, and they might be hurting other investors. Similar pattern for stock futures. And so in summary, limit orders dominate. AT contributes significantly to order cancellations and have little share in trades. and AT supply almost as much liquidity as they demand, and a significant percentage of order cancellations within 1 second, but we mostly see that these fast cancellations occur away from the touch. Going forward, what we plan to examine in this paper is there a significant intraday pattern, and why do we see a different pattern from AT towards the beginning as compared to the end of the rest of the day? Then, is there a difference in the order flow activity during the stress periods? And how then we'll link these numbers with the underlying market liquidity numbers. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Susan, for inviting me to this conference and to discuss. So now I have to be careful about what I say. It's being recorded. So I really enjoyed reading this paper. As Nidhi mentioned, this is very early stage work. So I'm fairly certain that at least some of my comments would be useful for the authors going forward. I learned many things while reading this paper, and one of those things is that there are 65,536 jiffies in a second. I did not know that jiffy is a clearly defined time unit. I only knew about milliseconds and nanoseconds. But apparently jiffy is also a unit at which their data is recorded. Okay. So Nidhi did a very good job of describing the data and the results. So just a quick summary. Data on equity spot and futures market, on NSE, data on orders and trade. And one of the unique features is that algorithmic traders are clearly labeled, clearly identified. And as I understand, this is not available in most of the other markets. So this is a great advantage. And the great advantage is also spot and futures together, and some of my comments will be about how the authors can exploit that feature. Okay? So currently the paper looks at two months period, one before the rise of algorithmic trading in 2009 and one after in 2013. Okay? And the results so far are that distribution of order types is different for ATs and non-ATs. There's a lot of cancellation by ATs, but most of the cancellations, at least in high market cap stocks, happens away from the best quotes, and there are some implications for that. And then ATs supply as much liquidity as they demand. Okay? Now my first comment, and clearly this is an early stage work, so it's natural that it is exploratory at this stage. But the way the current research questions are framed, they are very descriptive. For example, what is the difference in order types by ATs and non-ATs? So it would be useful to provide some motivation and some a priori hypothesis about what do we expect to find. Okay. And so my second comment, which is my main comment, is related to this, is that it would be useful to look at a comprehensive framework of potential costs and benefits of having ATs around. And Bayes and Woolley provide one such framework, and citing a paper from 2011 in a high-frequency world, it's almost an ancient paper, but they provide a very, very useful framework for thinking about what may be the potential cost and benefit. So I'm going to go with their framework to highlight some of the things that the authors can do. Okay. So one of the potential benefits is that ATs will aid price discovery because they are able to process information quickly, more efficiently, and they lead price discovery. And some of the papers in the US market have actually documented that ATs do help price discovery. And I think the authors are planning to investigate that as they say in the paper. So the second possible advantage of having ATs is efficiency across multiple markets. And this is where having data from both spot and futures would be of advantage. In say, if the no arbitrage conditions are enforced more quickly with ATs around than not. Okay. Liquidity provision by ATs is what the paper currently focuses on, and it's also clearly very important potential benefit that the ATs provide. But we need to dig deeper than the average level of liquidity supplied, and so I'll spend a little bit more time on liquidity provision, the questions about liquidity provision a little bit later. No, of course, as regulators and non-ATs world over worry that there are potential risks of having ATs around. Okay? Now, one risk is that non-ATs orders get picked off. So there's adverse selection. And this is sort of the flip side of the price discovery advantage. If ATs are leading price discovery, then somebody else is at the other end who are at a disadvantage. Okay? And one of the ways to examine this is to see what is the permanent price impact of AT order flow versus non-AT order flow. That will tell you what the price discovery is, and if it is different across ATs and non-ATs, that will tell you if the other party is being picked off. Okay. Now, other risk is that ATs might somehow manipulate either price or liquidity in the market to their own advantage and to the disadvantage of non-ATs. Okay? So Bayes and Woolley talk about sort of three kinds of strategies, and wonderfully colorful names are there for these strategies. So one is smoking. Smoking is basically strategies that will lure in other investors by attractive liquidity terms, but these attractive liquidity terms disappear as soon as other people come to trade. Okay? And the evidence in the paper that most of the cancellations happens away from the money does not support that this kind of manipulation is happening. The second is what is called spoofing, and my understanding is spoofing is something like you place orders in the other direction, in the opposite direction of where you want to actually trade. So if you want to buy, ATs place some orders on the sell side, and somehow making other market participants behave that the market is moving in the other direction. Okay. And then stuffing, and I think this is where you have room for exploration. Now, stuffing has nothing to do about manipulating actual liquidity or prices. It has to do with slowing other traders down. So basically, you submit a lot of orders, overwhelm, in some sense, the network, and you know that these are all junk orders, so you can filter them out quickly, but other traders have to actually process them and see if they are valuable information or not, and in terms of jiffies, that takes a long time. Okay? So the fact that you observe many cancellations away, in fact far away from the best quotes, there is room to examine if actually stuffing is going on. Okay? So this is something that you can examine. Okay. Now, one more potential cost is that there are some significant barriers to entry because of co-location, infrastructure, expenses, etc., etc. So if a small number of traders are actually controlling large fraction of the volume, but as Nidhi just explained, you probably will not be able to examine this issue since you don't have trader IDs. Okay? But a related point is that even if there are large number of traders, if their strategies are very, very similar, they will pose systematic risks. So they will behave all in the same way, and maybe this is something that you can examine if correlation across AT strategies is higher compared to non-AT strategies. And if that is the case, then when times are good, everything is fine. All ATs are supplying liquidity or demanding liquidity. But when a shock happens, they will all behave in the same way and create systematic risk for the market. Okay. And then again, if this correlation pattern is different across time, that particularly during times of stress, whether they are herding. So thinking in terms of a framework like this may help you sort of pull together various descriptive results. My third comment is about sort of looking at averages and drawing conclusions from that. Averages are very, very useful, but you may want to dig deeper about when ATs are demanding liquidity and when ATs are supplying liquidity, for example. And you already mentioned in the paper that you want to look at high versus low volatility period. Evidence in the US market also suggests that ATs tend to consume liquidity when it is cheap and supply liquidity when it is expensive. Okay? So this is particularly useful from resiliency point of view also. So you also want to look at periods of low spreads versus high spread. Also here again, looking at futures and spot markets may be useful. Maybe they are shunting liquidity from one market to the other. If it is cheap in futures market but expensive in spot market, maybe they are consuming liquidity in one market and supplying liquidity to the other market. Okay? So not just price efficiency, but liquidity efficiency across two markets may also be facilitated or hindered by AT activity. Now my last point is about competition between ATs and non-ATs, and possibly among ATs as well. Okay? So this is a recent paper by Yao and Ye. They look at when minimum tick size is binding, and this is one of the points Venki made in his discussion also. So if minimum tick size is binding, that is spread is at the minimum tick, there is no way traders can compete on price of liquidity, that is by narrowing the spread. Then they have to compete on time. Okay? And there clearly ATs have a huge advantage over non-ATs. Okay? So this Yao and Ye papers show that when minimum tick size is binding, then there is a huge queue because of time priority is the only thing that matters. And then non-ATs in such environment are forced to demand liquidity even though it may be profitable for them to supply it. Okay? And this puts them at a disadvantage. So sort of one way to quickly see is how many times the minimum tick size is binding. So what is basically the spread, the distribution of the spread at minimum tick versus away from the tick. And if the behavior of ATs is different, if it is at the minimum tick versus not. Okay? And so liquidity provision by ATs unconditionally may not be always a good thing. They may actually be out-competing non-ATs for provision of liquidity. So you may want to dig deeper into that. On the whole, I really enjoyed reading this paper, and I have some other minor things that I will chat with the authors later. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prachi. Do you have any comments from the floor? Yeah.
So I don't know the first thing about the equity market, but I thought it might be useful to tell Nidhi the perspective of somebody who doesn't know anything. Maybe it's not useful. So first of all, the last comment that ATs may be out-competing non-ATs. For someone like me, I couldn't care less, right? I mean, you always have more efficient firms or individuals out competing less ones. That's the way capitalism works. We're used to it. So that doesn't bother me. The issue about ATs for me is really threefold. First has to do with price discovery. Now, if you're moving the stock price toward an actual better price that more fully reflects the information on hand, then that's obviously a good thing. If the only thing that happens is speed, that you're getting to that equilibrium price marginally faster than before, one can ask, is this truly important, right? I mean, if we move there in 1 second or 1/10 of a second, is this socially valuable or not? It's really not obvious. And then comes the level playing field and the out competing. If what they're doing is stuffing the system, so that the Fed raises interest rates, the market is going to react, and what they do is stuff the system so that they can get to the equilibrium price and I cannot, then I'm not so sure that this is a valuable exercise. So maybe that's sort of my broadest comment. What I don't quite grasp, even though you've done some nice tables and some really great work, I still don't grasp what is it that these ATs are doing. What are they trying to achieve here? And I'd like a kind of answer to that question in the paper. So the first thing is relates to price discovery. Now the second thing that they could be doing, which was mentioned already in the comments, is they could be doing arbitrage amongst markets. And this is an incredibly valuable activity. And if you can show somehow that that's what they're doing, that in and of itself shows that AT trading is very, very helpful. So that you will, and there's a sort of notionally, in practice it's going to be really difficult to do, but notionally this is really, really easy, right? You can see whether arbitrage conditions that didn't hold in the past are now holding or holding better, or the discrepancies in the arbitrage equations are somehow less now because of algo trading. That's a really, really useful finding. And the third thing, which was also mentioned, is in terms of the resiliency of the market. Is it that you find that markets with more algo trading are more resilient than other markets, and you can cut this by as you put the size of market stock. I mean you have this sort of natural experiment even within a market. Some stocks have more AT and some stocks less, and do you find that contributes to the resilience? And then, as other people mentioned, does it depend on the period? But some general sense as to what exactly they're doing in the market would really help me get some idea of whether this is a good idea, a good thing or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, Ram.
Just kind of building on what Prachi said about this cancellations and it being possibly stuffing. So actually it might be, I don't know, my view is different. Maybe it's spoofing because you kind of put in a lot of orders behind the best quotes on one side of the market. And that, so if I'm an HFT who wants to buy, I put a lot of sell orders behind the best ask, and then seeing really large number of large sell orders sitting behind the best ask, people are going to kind of panic. And start selling, and then the HFT will buy. So I think one useful thing would be to see the size of these orders that are being cancelled, especially the ones that are kind of away from the best quotes. And if they tend to be very large, I think it would be like evidence of spoofing. That what BI kind of explains in his slides that's been floating on the web.
Mobis?
Yeah, I was just wondering, not being able to identify between HFT and the other type of AT, how big a handicap that would be for this kind of study, because the questions being asked are more HFT-centric concerns like fleeting orders and so on, but this is the whole gamut of AT, which is order execution type and stuff. So just a comment on not being able to identify just pure HFT, how big a handicap is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
My
yes,
comment is really for the authors from an academic perspective, which is that what's your goal in writing this paper? Is your goal in writing this paper a policy paper which provides guidance from an Indian perspective, or is your goal to examine an issue in depth? If from an academic perspective, you might want to define the issues you want to examine in much more sharply. And of course, Prachi provided kind of a kind of kitchen sink of objectives. And you may want to pick and choose a few which would be relevant. In this context, there is a lot of there has been a lot of focus more recently in the U.S. because of the case against Sarao, the Hounslow garage trader who has been charged with causing the flash crash. Because of stuffing the order book on one side and creating a huge order book order imbalance on one side, and then trading on that basis. Now, the legality, what is the legal situation in India in that context is a relevant question. Even in the United States, it is touch and go to be able to really prove that what is being done is illegal, since it's always been done in some form in normal markets as well. So it'll be nice to know. I'm interested in finding out what the legal situation in India is on that issue. To what extent are things like putting orders on one side and guaranteed cancellations so as to influence the market? To what extent is illegal? And the second issue is when you're analyzing data, which is so kindly provided by the NIC. Would you really does the NSC really want any kind of a study which will clearly show, hey, there's a huge amount of spoofing going on?
Well, okay. First, let Susan and Nidhi answer, and then I'll come in.
Can I have one point here? I think, I just want to take up on the point on spoofing, and I have a little bit experience watching this in real world. I think the exposure, right, the hidden order facility is actually very strategically used. Suppose you want to really have people play to your idea of spoofing, then you want to display more. So the orders which get cancelled, typically as following Ram's point, if you really want people to go the other direction, you would actually increase the disclosed quantity and reduce the hidden quantity. While if you're doing the traditional thing, people typically post a lot more hidden orders. So actually the proportion could be used strategically by you to actually figure out whether it's spoofing or not spoofing. Because in spoofing, you have to display. Because if you're hiding it, it doesn't matter, nobody cares. So that's one point. The other point is to Josh's thing is I think the HFT is generally put together in one bucket. There are multiple objectives. And traditionally, I would say about 60% of that is market making, which is largely, buy low, sell high. And I think the thing that I always sort of get amused when academics look strongly about how HFTs don't provide liquidity during these crash periods is that if you actually look at the amount of risk capital that gets traded during, let's say, a particular amount of volatility in the market, let's say a 1% move, how much gets traded relative to what used to be in specialist period? It's way more than what it is. So I think it is unfair to put HFT in the spot. because I think there's a lot more players who can actually get in and out of the market during volatile times now for a given unit of volatility compared to what it used to be in the specialists, because specialists would just stop trading. They would just move the price quickly, or they would just stop trading. So I think the fact that you do see flash crashes is very important, but I don't know whether that's actually worse off relative to what it used to be. And I just got one point on the paper itself. I think the notion of cancellation per se is not a big deal, right? Especially if it is not on the touch, right? And I wouldn't expect anybody to cancel at the touch because it's just too fast. So I think I totally empathize with a lot of other comments, which is the objective should be very clear, right? I mean, what is it that if you're looking at HFT's contribution to the marketplace in improving the marketplace, then I think the way the paper has to be taken is slightly different too.
Last comment from Dr. Krishna.
That NSE had a rule which sort of discouraged a low fill rate. That is, they wanted sort of more of the higher percentage of orders to be executed, and that therefore there's some kind of penalty. Now, I don't know whether that penalty reflects, whether that fill rate is computed only on orders that are not cancelled or withdrawn by the person submitting the orders, or whether they're on all the orders, but that might have something to do.
Okay, you'll respond first.
Yeah, questions in reverse. So first to what you mentioned, it's the orders to trades ratio fee that has been imposed by the regulator, which only says that if a member exceeds a certain number of orders in comparison to the trades, then he is supposed to pay a certain fee over it, because the idea is that algorithmic traders are sending a lot of orders which are not really productive because they do not get traded, and hence these guys should pay the penalty, because everybody else is not able to send their orders because of this guy taking up the bandwidth. So yeah, I guess that's the... Yes, we are seeing a higher. So that's another question, which is basically whether this orders to trade ratio fee is effective or not effective. That's a different question altogether. So thank you all for comments, and of course I agree, and with respect to the objective of the paper, I think the clear objective that we have in this paper is understanding the order flow by AT and non-AT, and liquidity, supply and demand. Now why that is important is because that's the central role of markets, and you want to know how that emerges when there is access to high speed versus low speed. So that's what we know, and we want to know. The reason now, when you say that we are not seeing a lot of orders being cancelled inside the touch, and we need to figure out why. The point is that we started examining this first to know whether that is true or not. Where are the orders getting cancelled? And only now that we know where are these orders getting cancelled, we can figure out what are the reasons behind cancellations. Are there spoofing or manipulation reasons? So we will delve into this deeper as to what are the possible causes of cancellations, and how does that affect the liquidity supply curve by AT and non-AT. With respect to, again, Professor Yadav's comments, same thing, I think I agree. That's what I presented a lot of tables, and this was just to give interesting insights from what we are seeing from the NSE data. But as we go forward, we'll narrow down whatever we have put together and put it with good econometric analysis with specific objectives and all. So that's the goal of the paper ultimately. And we think that this is important because even though there are a lot of papers examining market quality especially, and even say price discovery, there are limited papers which have actually looked at orders trade data for that matter, and how that is being shaped up. And therefore we see a relevance for this paper in academic literature also. Maybe it did not come out in the presentation so well, but I think we'll sharpen this further as we go forward while working on this paper. Okay. Again, with respect to Ram's comments, same things. We will look at, I think size of orders is very good idea. We will look at that, and we'll see whether they are, what's the size of trade. Now, Josh's comments. So when you say arbitrage conditions and price discovery, this actually we have tested for this in another paper of ours. So there's another paper which checks for price efficiency on the spot market. Yes, we do find that in comparison to stocks with high 80 versus low 80, the stocks which have high 80 have got higher price efficiency. Yeah, that is a bigger question as to the efficiency improvement that we are getting is whether that's socially good or not. That's a broader level question, and we can talk about that maybe later on that. Yeah, but your comment again on resiliency is well taken, and we'll see whether we can incorporate that or not into this paper. Yeah, coming to Prachi's comments, thank you very much for the discussion, and I think all of them are useful, and I think most of what you said, it is like going forward, we'll specify the major objective and how it will flow up. Thank you all.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. There's
Sorry,
one more.
I missed Mobi's
Mobi's
question
point.
on HFT. Yeah. So I think, again, there is no definition of HFT. Even SEC has got, like the definition is that there is higher cancellation and within short span of time. Now, what is short span of time? Nobody knows. So, as an exploratory exercise, we were actually examining, okay, let's see what is the percentage of order cancellation and modification in very short intervals spanning from, say, 10 milliseconds to 50 milliseconds to 1 second. And we saw less than 25% of the order activity on NSE is done within this time limit. So we were of the conclusion that possibly HFT is not of that grand scale over here as it is made to be. But we cannot pin that down as to what is HFT, what is the degree of HFT on the Indian markets. With this data, definitely not. Susan, do you have anything to say? Okay, thank you all.
That was, thanks for lively debate and discussion on the HFT and AT role in the markets. Final comments. Obviously, there are issues. A lot of, the entire regulatory fraternity across the world is really caught up about the influence of HFT on the market quality. So it's not different in India. There has been significant amount of debate which is going on. So that's the reason why, in fact, we thought we should put out as much data as possible into the public domain so that academics can look at it and possibly come out with a policy framework, policy suggestions, which would help the regulators to take informed decisions rather than just react to a lot of perceptional based decisions which are seeming to be happening across the world. There is fair amount of, Nidhi mentioned, there is fair amount of confusion between AT and HFT. And it's very difficult to really pin down HFT. Possibly in the paper, if you can look at the trading activity and figure out what is HFT and what is AT, because significant chunk of, in fact, Venki also has mentioned, significant chunk of AT is also execution algos. People who are using algos to slice and dice their orders. Considering India has a peculiar restriction on bulk block deals as such. So a lot of AT is actually execution algos where they actually slice and dice their orders and push into the market without to reduce the market impact. So there are too much of things mixed up in AT. So it's important to examine this in fair amount of detail. And we are more than happy to work with the researchers to help them understand the data. Obviously, we know the data much more deeply than most of you because we see it day in and day out, without really compromising on the fiduciary capacity which is on us in ensuring that the traders' identities are kept. We would be happy to work with you to take this so that we want actually informed policy decisions happening in this regulatory environment. That's the reason why, in fact, we are putting out as much data as possible into the public domain. Thank you very much.